Ladies and gentle days, you deserve a smoke break.
I'm your host, Rena Sapone-White.
And I'm Ella Schaefer, and we are here for our Smoke Break, a podcast where we take a break from our work as writer-directors to chat about queer stories of all kinds. This week, we're going to be talking about teenage sex and death at Camp Miasma. But first, let's play a game.
Uh-oh.
The game is, did Rena do her homework?
I don't like this game. This is a traumatic game. Homework is patriarchal.
Okay, I'll give you that one. However, I do want to say that this show is the most excited I've been about reality TV since the queer version of Are You the One? So I just want to talk about it with somebody, okay? Can you really blame me?
I can't blame you for that. I can blame you for making your microphone level go to the red because you're screaming at me. Would you like to talk about the show even if Rena didn't do her homework?
I don't know if I mean, what is there to say if I don't have somebody to just vibe with? I'm at a loss.
Would you like to talk about something else gay?
Yeah, do you have anything in mind?
I do have it on Threads authority that Heated Rivalry is about to start shooting.
I've heard that too, and they were like, please leave us alone. If you see us shooting, please don't say anything.
Good luck to them. I did see a intriguing theory this morning that Indy Navarrete could be joining the cast in season 2. Now, this is a very far reach. For those who don't know, Indy Navarrete, breakout star of Obsession, has been photographed with Sophie Nélisse. She's posted some stuff with a few different cast members, but also she follows Connor, but not Hudson or something like that. I have read the books. I don't have an inkling of who she would play, and perhaps they have just reached out to her as fellow people who were subject to overnight success in the last year, and she's just finding some comfort by that friendship.
Or she's shooting something up in Canada as well.
Yeah, with a handful of the same people who are currently shooting Heated Rivalry.
but they could be shooting in the same location.
Sure. I'm just here to stir the pot and not do my homework.
Yeah, we know. The only other thing that I can think about is all of the queer directors saying fuck no to Harry Potter, which we love to see it. Especially with all of the other cast members being like, you know, I really support the queer community, but I just had to be in Harry Potter.
The reasoning does not check out. It's one thing to be adapting the work of someone who has long since passed, who was problematic, when there's an opportunity to maybe reinvent the work or even add a contemporary spin on an adaptation of someone who, it's since come to light, was bigoted in some way, and get a queer person to reinvent it, which is a little foreshadowing of our conversation. But it is an entire other thing to be adapting the work of someone who is very actively alive, outspoken, and using the proceeds of said work's success to finance lobbying against trans people and trans rights.
Now that you say it, I am dying to see J.K. Rowling and then a queer adaptation of Harry Potter. That bad? Is that bad to wish for? Because it's so gay. He's literally in the closet.
Even her retroactively saying that Dumbledore was gay, but also simultaneously choosing not to have that as part of the story itself. I think there is so much to dig into, and I would love for someone to come in and queerify it and transify it and just make it as fucking gay as it deserves to be and let her roll over in her grave.
Yes, I can't wait for that day.
Maybe that's our homework, our long-term homework. At the same time, I would love to do something that she would disapprove of with her body of work. I also just think about how many incredible queer and trans authors who are already leaps and bounds better writers and creators than her deserve to have their work adapted, and for us all to just acknowledge that Harry Potter was also really an amalgamation of so many other inspirations that predecessed her, and just fucking forget about Harry Potter altogether.
Yeah, also
as
down
much
for
as
that.
those books were very important to me growing up and really were an introduction into fantasy writers, and I can be very nostalgic about that work and what it meant to me at the time, and also acknowledge that it is just completely soured in my mind.
Well, fuck that. Let's talk about something really beautiful and lovely. I think this week we're going to finally share some opinions on a movie.
I think so too.
Okay, Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma by Jane Schoenbrunn is about a young upcoming queer writer-director played by Hannah Einbinder, and she is taking on a horror franchise that has been done over and over and over again to literal death.
Very much modeled after Halloween and Friday the 13th, sleepaway camp, sort of horror slashers of the 80s.
Yes, and she's coming to remake again with her take, because it's such a problematic franchise that they hire a queer person to come in and revitalize what was a very unfortunate origin story in the originals, which I felt so deeply as a filmmaker. I was like, oh yeah, I've seen this over and over again, where they're bringing back an IP that should be dead and trying to queer it, or, you know, just do something different with it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but that idea was so fun to me.
And I don't feel like there's been a lot of art made about that phenomenon, because it feels like a very contemporary phenomenon of bringing in somebody who, to the mainstream, like checks the diversity boxes, whatever that means to them, as a way to justify reviving IP that has already been done to death, because Hollywood always, clearly, look at what's in theaters 99% of the time.
I mean, look what's in theaters at the same time as Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma.
Exactly. Unwilling to look beyond the scope of something that's proven IP. That's what you hear all the time as a filmmaker. And it gets to a really ridiculous point where I have very successful screenwriter friends who have sold pitches based on the promise that they will subsequently publish a book or a graphic novel, so that the thing that they are pitching will become based on IP, intellectual property, by the way, which could be a book or an article or a previous film. It doesn't even have to be proven in the sense that it was successful. It's become such a pathological requirement for studios and financiers that they'll even hear a great idea for a film and want you to work backwards to make it based on something.
I was listening to a podcast with Jane earlier, and some sort of executive told Jane that originality does not make money, and therefore they needed to make movies that weren't just, you know, Jane Schoenbrunn. They needed to make more accessible films. And Jane was like, well, fuck you. I'm going to go do what I do, and has obviously had a lot of success post meeting with that person. But I just think that is such an ill-informed opinion. I mean, I don't know the numbers on this movie this weekend. It didn't make up its budget or anything yet that I'm aware of, but I had such a wonderful experience watching this movie. It was euphoric. And I think a lot of people come out of it and they don't, quote unquote, get it. But I think queer people get it and feel it. And maybe it just takes a little bit more analysis from someone who maybe isn't in queer spaces as much. But, you know, I'm not trans. However, I really, really deeply related to a lot of what this movie was doing. And I was going to say what this movie was saying, but I feel like it was more of a feeling than a message exactly, which I thought was so beautifully done. And I can't imagine that must be so hard to accomplish.
Okay, yeah, my head is spinning. I had so many thoughts about this film that I was excited to share on today's podcast, but I think first and foremost, I want you to describe the feeling.
I just got chills when you asked that question. I was just like giddy. It was this euphoria, which I would imagine can be related back to gender euphoria. I heard this in an interview with Jane about finally being able to have sex and feel like you are yourself. And again, I'm not trans, but I've had a lot of bad sexual experiences in my life, and the dissociation of it all with Hannah's character. I just felt that so deeply, and the healing by the end of all of that, and diving into those feelings that otherwise you would probably block out, not want to associate with, not want to dive into, and having that safe space to do it was just so, again, euphoric for me. And I just felt seen, even though this movie wasn't about me, you know?
This conversation is obviously going to be full of spoilers for the film, but I think almost more so in the interest of the conversation and less explaining the movie, I want to put into words to me what the story was so that then we can talk about it. And I'm also curious if this was your impression too. And I will say, in the interest of us having this convo, I specifically did not read any reviews or analyses of this film because I just wanted to talk about it from my own impressions. So I don't know if my takes are at all unique or wrong. And I also actually did not listen to interviews with Jane again because I was just like, I'm in such a specific headspace from watching this that I just want this to be my own reaction.
There weren't many. And the one that I found, they did some promotional podcasts, which I could just listen to Jane Schoenbrunn talk about movies all day long. The one that I listened to asking more about the movie, they didn't really go into it so much of what the intentions were. Honestly, Jane was more like, I don't know if I can explain the intention. They were like, I hope people can take what I have cultivated in this movie and run with it, which felt so inspiring to me to hear them say that, because I was like, you got it. For both of our movies that we're working on right now, there's a lot of shared DNA that made me so excited to see this movie and that it exists.
Well, with Jane's permission then, a quick recap of where the film starts. Hannah Einbinder plays Chris Williams, who is an up-and-coming filmmaker, Sundance indie darling director, who's been tapped by a studio to reboot this long-running franchise, the Camp Miasma films, which take place at a summer camp. And Billy Presley, who is played by Gillian Anderson, was the star of the very first Camp Miasma film and is just kind of this enigmatic recluse who never started another film in spite of people wanting her back in the franchise. And she actually lives at the summer camp where the original movie was shot, and she's invited Chris up to her place to cook her dinner. So that's where the film starts. Chris Williams going out to this snowy camp. It's dead winter. Her car breaks down. She tromps through the snow, and while looking for Chris's place, stumbles into the camp movie theater. And while watching this old reel of the very first Camp Miasma film, Billy shows up behind her, and it's just this kind of electric spark between them. She gives her this KFC dinner because she didn't have it in her to cook. And
the dipping sauce is... Oh, the dipping sauces.
Gillian Anderson has this wonderful, smooth Southern accent. There are all these references early on. Chris is on the phone at the gas station prior to going out to the camp with her partner, played by Jasmine Savoy Brown from the Yellow Jackets and The Leftovers, who I fucking love. And they're kind of making jokes about Billy Presley being this Norma Desmond character from Sunset Boulevard. And she really is modeled, I think, Billy, after Norma Desmond. She's just wears these long silk robes. She's got this
so
Southern accent. She has this wonderful soft, I don't know what to call it. It's not a bob, but just a very sort of starlit hairstyle. I mean, the vibes are all there. Everything in her cabin is lit with this kind of glowy, dim light. And it's clear from the beginning that Chris is very taken with her and really wants, in spite of being self-aware that the studio is tapping her to remake this franchise as part of their kind of big capitalist agenda, she herself is very committed to making something new within the franchise and tapping into the queer trans origin story of the villain of these movies, which is a character named Little Death, played brilliantly by Jack Haven. I think I actually have too many thoughts about this film, and it's made it hard to articulate because my brain is going a mile a minute.
Like I was saying, it's almost more a feeling of experiencing this movie than just an analysis of it. If anybody is listening and hasn't seen it yet, they should absolutely go see it.
To me, the movie starts as like a writer-director doing her research, meeting the original star, and you kind of think it's going in this direction of either like she's going to find out that the camp really is haunted. And it seems even in the beginning, because Gillian Anderson's character is sort of making a quip about it, but seems semi-serious, that like you're going to find out that Little Death actually lives in the lake. And that seems to be where it is pointing. And then there's this shift where it ultimately very much becomes about what the film's meant to Chris and how watching this movie, the original film, watching Gillian Anderson in it, but watching the movie overall, like impacted her own development as a queer person, her sexual identity, her gender identity, all of these things, and ultimately plays out as a commentary on fantasy fulfillment and self-actualization, and very much like a queer origin story in and of itself for Chris Williams. And I related to it, I think, so much because I feel growing up as a queer person consuming media, you so frequently relate to quote unquote the wrong character, the character that you're
the
not
villain
meant to relate to. Often the villain or sort of the weirdo outcast side friend character. I mean, I can think of all these different genres, but it becomes really clear that in this connection with Billy Presley, who is also kind of a social outcast by choice, who's a recluse, as the newspapers in the beginning of the film call her. There's a safety in her being an outcast, and it allows Hannah Einbinder's character to ultimately play out this psychosexual fantasy where she wants to be the victim of Little Death. And that is the thing for her that has been a scenario that actually turns her on, makes her feel fully present in her body in a way that other forms of sex have not. And it becomes, like Ella said in the beginning, this kind of like gender sexual euphoria that we build up to at the very end of the film that is so much less about the horror that you think it's turning towards in the beginning and much more about sex and romance and self-actualization in a way that feels so inherently queer to me as a trajectory, and something I've never seen on film. And I think that's why I'm struggling in so many different ways to articulate what the fuck this movie was about to me, because I haven't seen this story arc drawn out before.
It really did take a turn in a surprising, in a good way, direction. I think in that way it kind of recontextualized the slasher, because queer people, through these movies that it's homaging, especially Sleepaway Camp, the trans people are the punchline. Seeing this totally flipped on its head, where now your fear and desire as a queer person watching these kinds of movies, you now see yourself literally, again, so many thoughts going through my head too, but you're literally put in the head of Little Death, which also such cool design. It's an old camera, and having both characters see themselves through the eyes of Little Death is such a cool turn of this really horrible thriller trope of trans people being the villains, just really urging you literally to see through this villain's eyes.
And to see how embodying the villain could actually lead to, and sorry we're saying the word euphoria so much, but like to a true self-actualized euphoria, orgasm.
And for me, that's Little Death. I was so inspired for our film in particular because the gore was euphoric in that way, like the spurts, and it was really horny.
It was super horny, and the happy ending is our two main characters just covered in blood and walking through the world really without a care and feeling more themselves than at any other point in the film. Like, it is a happy ending where they are covered in blood. And I think that as a metaphor for queerness and for transness and for walking through the world
as your true self,
the version of yourself that is more reflective of who you are than any other previous version, even if other people are looking at that in horror or disgust. It's just beautiful. I cried at the end of this movie, and as I teared up also was laughing at myself of just how ridiculous it was to be so moved by what was on screen, and yet how not ridiculous it was, because it's such a rare thing to see that experience reflected back in film. And I feel like that is exactly what Jane Schoenbrunn was aiming toward, even though I cannot speak for what was in their mind, because I think they're just like a mega level genius who
absolutely
I couldn't even hope to fully analyze. But I think I understood the sliver that made sense to me touched me deeply.
I think something that they did so well, they're a huge horror fan. You go into a horror movie and it allows you to go to a scary place, right? That you wouldn't want to actually experience in real life, but it allows you this thrill that you're in reality trying to avoid in your real life. But so expertly showcasing that at the end of the movie through this post-dissociative sex experience. I mean, it's more than an experience. It's like a lifetime of dissociative sex, and then really going to this scary place and then it being so beautiful. Again, euphoric, visceral, the fear and the danger turning into this desire. I mean, it's really like the queer experience encapsulated. I feel like that's what queer people experience, is being afraid and feeling like you're in danger.
And feeling that your desire is disgusting and bad.
Yeah.
And shameful.
Yeah. It was just done so beautifully.
Yeah. Again, 100 thoughts racing through my head. The one that comes to mind, which isn't that deep, was just I loved the soundtrack and the use of the music and the score. Yes. From the very first moments, OK Kaya does this cover of REM's Night Swimming alongside this montage of kind of all of the newspaper articles and different special edition VHS and DVD and paraphernalia for this franchise. And it just sets a tone that you're immediately like, okay, I don't know where this is going to go. The Counting Crows song, like Long December, set to a very gory sequence, which is also just beautiful and hilarious. And I don't know the name of the song at the end, not the end credits, but right before. It's just the soundtrack, the tone. I cannot express enough as a filmmaker how specific of a tone Jane Schoenbrunn had to land to make this film work, and they nailed it. They did a fucking triple axel and they landed cleanly on the ice. I mean, it is mwah.
Chef's kiss for sure. I just want to go see it again.
I do too. I think I need to see it in theaters again. I really enjoyed watching it in a pretty crowded audience too, because there was something sort of healing about seeing it alongside a bunch of other people who were having their own reactions and responses. I did feel like I was getting to have a collective experience. Was your theater crowded at all, or what was the vibe?
My theaters are never crowded, but I tend to go to earlier movies. I think we went at 5 p.m., so people weren't quite off work yet, or they had just gotten off of work, that kind of zone. But I'm such an old lady that if I see anything at 8 p.m., for example, I fall asleep. And even if the movie is
that
good,
is past her bedtime. Something that I certainly was thinking about as I left the theater was Ella and I, a few weeks ago, we were in Orlando for the Golden Crown Literary Society's annual conference, which is a Sapphic book conference. And not only did we win a Goldie for our second book, Sweet Talk, we also got to host a panel that we had put together, which was titled Be Gay, Do Crime, on Reclaiming Queer Villainy. We had an incredible panel of authors that we got to pick the brains of with lots of hot take questions on what it means to write queer villains. And so much of that discussion just came to mind after watching Camp Miasma, because this was such a brilliant commentary on queer villainy and its place in mainstream pop culture, which was also something that Ella and I researched a lot prior to hosting the panel, because we kind of wanted to summarize some of that in our own intro at the conference. And one of the things that we discussed was how the introduction of the Hays Code, which banned any sort of overt queerness in Hollywood, there came this accepted avenue in film for representing queerness. Largely, it was acceptable to have a queer or trans coded character as long as they were the bad guy, because I think that created enough distance. It was socially acceptable in a homophobic, transphobic world to acknowledge that those people existed as long as they weren't painted as the heroes or morally good. You can look at so many Disney films. Ursula from Little Mermaid was modeled after the drag queen Divine. Cruella de Vil was modeled on famous bisexual socialite Tallulah Bankhead. There's so many examples of this, but I think then what happened for a lot of queer kids, and I can relate to this myself, and I also feel like Hannah Einbinder's character in Camp Miasma is very much alluding to this phenomenon in her relationship to Little Death in the Miasma movies, is you see these queer-coded villains and you do feel shame for feeling some sort of kinship or admiration for them, because even though they're being painted as morally bad or doing something wrong to the protagonist, there's something familiar about them in a way that you might not feel about Ariel, the Little Mermaid. It's a reflection of the queer experience itself, that when you see yourself in figures that the homophobic, bigoted, transphobic public have deemed bad, then you feel bad yourself. But then you also, I think, shame plays a big role in how people's sexuality develops, and shame and trauma and all of these things also feed into the very thing that gets you going or that you identify with sexually, which is very much what Camp Miasma is talking about. It's a really prescient subject matter to make a film about, and as I have already said on this podcast, I just think it's not a story that I've ever seen told on screen. And by the way, if someone has an example of some other movie or book
to see it
that is about, please tell me. I simply can't think of one, but I'm invigorated by the subject matter. And I think it's a really important story, and it really validates a lot of queer and trans people's experiences, I would imagine.
And for us in particular, it makes me so excited for the stories that we have to tell. I was a little nervous at first with the character being named Little Death. I was like, oh gosh, it's another horror movie, which, by the way, let's call it as it is. This is not really a horror movie. It's a love story.
It's a love story that pulls you in thinking it's a horror, which is also very much
beautiful.
Like queering the genre.
Yes, it's so good. But I was nervous because I was worried that it may share a little too much DNA with our movie, potentially. It does not. I think they would be an insane double feature. Seeing what Jane did made me so excited to make our movies. And I agree that it's not something that I've seen, and it needs to keep being talked about. And it's not always that I see a movie and it invigorates me so much and so deeply, like to my core. I crave that kind of feeling after a movie. And I don't know that I've felt that in a really long time in the same way that teenage sex and death at Camp Miasma did it for me.
Completely. I also want to just shout out, like, visually, this movie was so gorgeous.
Which, by the way, you were talking about how it was set during the winter earlier, and it was shot in, I believe, June, which is crazy.
Movie magic. Well, and by the end, all the snow has melted, which is also just this beautiful metaphor. I believe shot on film, at least it looked like it was. All of these painted backdrops, the color scheme. It was so clear what the visual references were for the film that I feel like I could reverse make the like pitch deck with old romance novel covers and also old horror movie painted posters. Like the reds and the oranges, and then even just how the snow looks, and just that feeling that you're watching movie magic and that you're not ever able to totally separate from the artifice was also just a huge part of, again, driving home what the themes were.
I agree. And it told you kind of subliminally what the movie was going to become. If you had any idea going in that it was some sort of horror movie, I think it visually told you, no, this is not what this is. This is kind of a dream.
Yeah, completely. Jane Schoenbrunn is making the movies that I want to see and wished were being made a really long time ago in my own journey as a queer person, and making them fun and whimsical and
sexy.
Just sexy and daring and funny and beautiful. And this is what the world needs. This is what heals the world.
Hannah Einbinder, topless, surrounded by candy wrappers. Are you kidding me? We should all be bowing down to Jane Schoenbrunn.
So, question, do we know what is next for Jane Schoenbrunn in the Jane Schoenbrunniverse.
That's good. We should pitch that. We do. They are directing a TV show called Black Hole based on a graphic novel. It's about a group of high school students who are afflicted by an STD known as teen plague or the bug, and a lot of weird symptoms that they get from it, and they turn into like a creature. I haven't read the graphic novel, but it sounds pretty up Jane's alley. I will unfortunately be getting Netflix again to watch.
Do what you gotta do.
Wherever Jane is, now I am there.
Yeah.
That movie touched me in a way that I don't know that any movie has before. So thanks, Jane.
Thank you, Jane. As with most of this episode, the movie blew my mind so much that I lost the power of speech. But honestly, being inarticulate is my indication that my brain is going at like 1,000 miles an hour.
Articulation almost gets in the way of this movie. It needs to be experienced. It's such a feeling, like I said in the beginning, but it's like a cozy blanket that you just get to sit in for 2 hours. And I think even non-horror fans will love this. It's definitely about queerness and for queer audiences, but I think people who aren't queer will also feel this feeling, although they may not be able to understand it at first glance as much. But I think, that's why we're here talking about these things. We're discussing art in all of its facets, and some things are proving more difficult to discuss and to talk about, but I'm really glad that we had this conversation, and I'm just grateful that we got to gush over such a good gay movie.
Completely agreed. Okay, final question. So let's set the Harry Potter discussion aside. Fuck J.K. Rowling. You are being tapped to reboot or add to a pre-existing franchise as a queer person, and you get to choose what it's going to be. What are you doing?
We already have our answer.
Do we?
The Ring.
Oh, you're right. No further questions, Your Honor. To our fans, our billions of fans listening to our episodes, you're just going to have to stay tuned to find out what we mean by that. But yeah, no, Ella's correct. We already know exactly which franchise we have something to add to, and it is The Ring. And that's it. End of conversation.
No.
Sorry.
And
don't put that in the podcast. We need to keep that close to the chest. I don't want to give anybody any ideas. No, we do. There is an IP. I guess it is a franchise of sorts already, but loosely that we have plans for the minute that a studio comes knocking and wants to give us the really big bucks. And just trust us. It's what dreams are made of. And it's not Lizzie McGuire. That's not a clue. I just love Lizzie McGuire. So
stay tuned. We'll be back next week with actually I don't know what movie.
There you go.
We're gonna figure that out.
A surprise even to us. Thank you for listening. Yeah. This has been your
Smoke Break. These are kisses and also blunts.
Oh, I like that. All right. Rena, Ella, out.